Hi y'all! Today I'm going to be reviewing The Last Patriot by Brad Thor. I got this book from a library sale. Once a year my library gets rid of all their old books they don't want anymore, and hardbacks are $1 and paperbacks are 50 cents. So I get a lot of my books from that once a year sale. I admit I had never heard about Brad Thor before, and mostly what I saw when I was going through that sale is this fantastic font. You know, this is a great cover, and the font is fantastic. I love fonts. Also, the name Brad Thor is badass. I thought it was the title of the book at first, because Brad Thor is badass. Also, not gonna lie, the back cover was a big part of why I went ahead and bought it.
He's very handsome, isn't he?
The publishers knew what they were doing when they put a full-size picture on the back there. So obviously this is a thriller, so right there, and I genuinely can't help but compare it to a different book which I also recently read, which is The Da Vinci Code. The feel of these two books is exceptionally similar. And to put into exact context why I think these books are so similar, what I will say is that this book was published in 2006 and is about a group of people trying to find a lost piece of information about the Christian faith in opposition to a corrupt segment of that faith who believes that public knowledge of this lost information will fundamentally undermine their religion and cause worldwide consequences. Car chases, firefights, intrigue, and adventure ensue. This book is about a group of people trying to find a lost piece of information about the Islamic faith in opposition to a corrupt segment of that religion who believes that public knowledge of this lost piece of information will fundamentally undermine the basis of their religion and cause worldwide consequences. Car chases, firefights, intrigue, and adventure ensue.
I wasn't stealing them. I was happy to...
Now that that's out of the way, I will say that one of my favorite parts about this book is that it reminded me heavily of the Da Vinci Code, and I loved the Da Vinci Code. It has the same feel to it. Even the writing style I found to be very similar. This book knows its history, a lot of research clearly went into it, but it's also not afraid to take some liberties with it. On the other hand, I felt this book had a lot of issues. There were at least 3 point-of-view characters in this book, and the chapters were not clearly specified onto whose point of view we were looking at. I got lost several times. I had to look back to figure out, wait a minute, whose eyes am I looking through? A lot of the sequence of events seemed a little nonsensical, and there was a lot of exposition all throughout the book. Now, on that point, I didn't know until I was finished with the book and I went to update my Goodreads account that this book is actually number 7 in some series or standalone series. Book number 7. Now, there is nothing on the cover, there is nothing in the jackets, there is nothing anywhere here to indicate that this is a book in a series or that I shouldn't be reading this first. Absolutely nothing. I checked. So I can only guess now that a lot of the exposition I was hearing about were minor callbacks to character developments that happened in the previous 6 books. The plot itself seemed like a standalone, so I don't know whether to call this a standalone or not. It kind of feels like a standalone, but there were problems with exposition if it's not a standalone. I'm really confused on that point. Now, for a 2008 book, this had some interesting commentary on American political correctness, something I wouldn't have expected from a 2008 book. I expected more for, 2018 book, but for 2008, that might have been a little ahead of its time. I felt there were a couple of oddly lazy moments in the book. Without giving away spoilers, for instance, there was one scene where a character who we'd just spent about a page and a half describing the man, he was very frail, he was very old, he was very thin, he was he was a small man and he clearly didn't have a lot of strength to him. So one of the many chases ensues, and this man, who is described as a pencil, basically, somehow manages to knock over a bookcase while he's running away from someone else. This was a large bookcase, and it just seemed really out of place considering we'd just spent all this time establishing that he's this tiny little man. Another part was when a character was out of commission for a time with some headaches. And it would be a minor spoiler, but I won't give it. But the reason for the headaches didn't make any sort of medical sense, and it would have been so easy to blame the headaches on an event that happened earlier in the book that the character was involved in. And to give the headaches a reason that wasn't medically possible when we had a perfectly legit reason right there? Some people are going to say I'm nitpicking this, but it really stuck out to me, especially in a book that clearly a lot of research went into this book, and to have just that sort of thing hanging out there, it felt very odd to me. Now, for the most part, I did enjoy it. I read it all the way to the end. I did enjoy the ending. I had some mixed feelings on it. A lot of previous reviewers have said they didn't like the ending, that they felt it was a cheap ending, but I did like it. I felt like there was enough background established in the character work earlier in the book to warrant that ending and to have earned it. So I didn't have a problem with the ending, and I liked it. I also need to talk about this book's portrayal of women in general. So there are a number of female characters in this book, some minor, some major, but every single one of them is drop dead gorgeous, and every single man who gets around them can't help but comment how drop dead gorgeous they are, and can't help but notice, and can't help but, fall in love with them just by being in their presence. To the extent of sarcasm, except it wasn't sarcasm. Now, to be fair, this is a pretty common trope and cliche in thrillers. It's not something that normally bothers me, except that it was so over the top in this book from page one, literally from page one. And I do mean every single woman was drop dead gorgeous, including the woman who got half of her face blown off in Iraq a few years back, lost an eye, lost half her face. She's still drop dead gorgeous because, they did a really good job with the plastic surgery and she hit the gym afterwards. This isn't normally something I nitpick on because I realize most thrillers are written towards a male demographic and thrillers are a form of escapism. And if I'm bothered by the fact that, there's a little bit of fantasy fulfillment in thrillers geared toward men, then I also have to be a little upset about the fact that, I read romance novels. So we're not going to analyze that bit. What I am going to say is that there are ways to use this trope and use these cliches in a way that is self-aware. You can still go as over the top with this as you want, but having a bit of a tongue-in-cheek attitude, letting your audience know you have a bit of self-awareness about it will go a long way towards suspension of disbelief and towards your readers cutting you some slack. You can seriously go over the top if you just kind of make a joke about it.
My name is Pussy Galore.
We all know what I'm talking about. This book plays the cliche up to the point of sarcasm and parody, except that it's trying to be serious about it, and it doesn't work. So to sum up, I would say if you liked the Da Vinci Code and you're looking for a similar thriller, you will probably like this. Particularly, this book focuses more on action scenes than the Da Vinci Code did, and it focuses less on the sense of intellectual discovery than the Da Vinci Code did. So I would say it's a good cross between the Da Vinci Code and the Jason Bourne series. If you liked both of those, you will probably like this book very much. It's a good book, and it does have a good story. The characters were pretty interesting to me, and I had fun with it. Ultimately, this was a 3-star read for me. 3 stars for me is not bad. It's something I still enjoyed, but either there wasn't anything it impressed me on, or there were significant problems that would pull back a 4-star read. And that's what this one is. It did have some problems that I felt were not worthy of a 4-star read, but it's still a book I would recommend to the right reader. That's all from me today. Talk to me in the comments. Have you read The Last Patriot by Brad Thor, or have you read any of the other 6 books that apparently came before The Patriot by Brad Thor? If not, are you interested in reading it now? I'd love to hear from you. So until then, bye-bye. Fireflights, action adventure. So another thing we need to talk about in this book is the hyper over-sexualized portrayal of every single female character in the book. Because I am a hypocrite.